Every single day, 8.5 billion searches are typed into Google, more than one search for every person alive on this earth, each of them reaching into the same invisible machine, asking their questions, hunting their answers, trusting the results, and Google delivers every time in under a second. In one single hour, Google processes more information than every library on this earth combined. Every book ever printed, every article ever written, Google moves past all of it before you finished your morning coffee. But here is the thing almost nobody knows. Thank you for the pitch. We're going to pass. In 1998, the very year Google was born, the two people who built it did not want to keep it. They tried to sell it to Yahoo for $1 million, and Yahoo said no. And that rejection, that single catastrophic mistake by one of the most powerful internet companies on earth, is where this story really begins. Because today, the company Yahoo turned away for $1 million is worth more than $2 trillion. Let those numbers land for a second. Google, operating under its parent company Alphabet, carries a market valuation that surpasses the entire GDP of France. It owns YouTube, the second most visited website on the planet. It runs Android on over 3 billion active smartphones across every continent. It commands 92% of every global internet search. 9 out of every 10 times a human being types a question, Google provides the answer. Google knows more about what humans think, fear, hope for, and want to buy than any government in the history of civilization. It has mapped every road, every building, every neighborhood on Earth. It reads billions of emails. It watches billions of hours of video. It listens with permission in hundreds of millions of homes. And all that was built by 2 PhD students who couldn't agree on anything. Without the crawler, there's nothing to index. Arguing in a parking lot at Stanford University. This is their story, and in the next 40 minutes, you are going to watch the full, unfiltered, cinematic story of Google. From a dormitory room experiment called Backrub, to the blank white homepage that outmaneuvered every competitor with nothing but empty space, to the $1.65 billion acquisition the world called reckless, and history has since called genius. You will understand why the founders tried to sell the company before it launched, and how that failure was the best thing that ever happened to them. The exact moment a man named Eric Veach walked into a conference room and accidentally handed Google the most profitable advertising model in the history of commerce. Why Google's real competitive moat has never been its search engine. The search engine is the door, and the data behind it is the fortress. Stay until the very end. The summer of 1995, Stanford University, Palo Alto, California. The campus sits in the heart of Silicon Valley, the most concentrated collection of technological ambition on the planet. Every professor has a patent. Every grad student has a side project. The air smells like freshly minted stock options and coffee consumed urgently by people with somewhere more important to be. Into this environment steps a 22-year-old from Michigan named Lawrence Page. Larry Page arrived at Stanford as a prospective PhD student, quiet, methodical, engineering-focused in the most precise sense of the word. He thought in systems. He saw problems before most people noticed they existed. And he arrived at Stanford carrying a question that would not leave him alone, buzzing at the edge of his thinking like a signal waiting to be decoded. The World Wide Web was growing at an exponential rate. Millions of pages, hundreds of millions of links. And yet there was no map, no reliable way to know which pages mattered, which information was trustworthy. The internet was a library where someone had scattered all the books across every floor, torn out all the catalog cards, and then set the lights to flicker. Larry Page looked at that problem the way a structural engineer looks at a collapsing bridge, not with despair, but with the quiet, precise calculation of a person who believes the problem has a solution and intends to find it. Sergey Brin was the person assigned to show him around. Born in Moscow in 1973, Sergey Brin had arrived in the United States at the age of 6 when his family fled the Soviet Union. His father was a mathematics professor, his mother was a researcher at NASA. Intelligence was the family language. Professor, I have to disagree. Your rank definition overlooks the initial node bias. Sergey, the bias is corrected in the damping factor, but damping can't fix a flawed initial state. It needs a stronger prior. Interesting. Show me the math. So when Larry Page and Sergey Brin spent that first afternoon together on a campus tour in the summer of 1995, the collision was immediate. Point, they disagreed about urban planning, they disagreed about data organization, they disagreed about almost everything. By the time the campus tour was over, they had not found a single point of agreement. They became best friends within months because two brilliant people who disagree about everything, when they finally find the one thing they agree on, build something neither could have reached alone. The thing they argued about, how to organize information, how to make the chaos of the internet navigable, became their entire company. And the company they built became the most important information infrastructure in human history. Larry Page's original PhD project was called Backrub. The name was unglamorous, the idea was not. The central insight behind Backrub was simple in the way that the best ideas always are, simple in the sense that once you hear it, it seems obvious. But only because someone was brilliant enough to see it first. Here is the insight. The importance of a web page cannot be determined by what is on the page itself. It can only be determined by who points to it. Think of it the way academics think about research papers. A paper's importance is measured by how many other papers cite it. Not by how eloquent it is, not by how long it is, but by how many other scientists reference it. Larry Page looked at the links to web pages and saw the same logic at work. Every link from one web page to another is a vote, and not all votes are equal. A link from a trusted, widely cited page carries more weight than one from an obscure corner nobody reads. The more important a page was, the more other important pages linked to it. Importance bred importance. Trust bred trust. He called the algorithm PageRank, part his own surname, part what it literally did. It ranked pages. The search engines that existed before PageRank, Alta Vista, Excite, Lycos, Yahoo, all ranked web pages by how many times the search term appeared on the page. The more times the word appeared, the higher the page ranked. Websites stuffed their pages full of repeated keywords: buy shoes, cheap shoes, discount shoes, shoes, and ranked at the top of every search whether they deserved to be there or not. The results were garbage. Users knew it, but nobody had built anything better. PageRank made relevance impossible to fake. You could not stuff keywords into a backlink profile. You could not bribe Harvard's website into linking to you. The internet itself would have to vote for your page, and the internet was not for sale. The results from the early Google search engine were, in the words of anyone who used them for the first time, dramatically better than anything else that existed. Not incrementally, not marginally. Better in the way that a map is better than a guest. Sergey Brin saw the PageRank algorithm the first time Page showed it to him and recognized it immediately, not just as a clever hack, but as something genuinely new, something with implications that reach far beyond a PhD dissertation. Together, they built a search engine on top of PageRank and called it Google, a deliberate misspelling of the mathematical term Google, representing the number 1 followed by 100 zeros. More than all the atoms in the observable universe. A number chosen because it captured the staggering, almost incomprehensible scale of information they intended to organize. The name was a typo. It became the most recognized brand name on Earth. Here's the part of Google's origin story that almost nobody tells, sir. Larry Page and Sergey Brin never wanted to build a company. They were PhD students, they had dissertation committees, they had advisors already concerned about how much time they were spending on this project. So in 1998, before Google had a single dollar of revenue, before it had an office, before it had a name beyond a research project on borrowed computing equipment, Page and Brin sat down and made a decision. They were going to call Yahoo. Their first call was to Yahoo. Yahoo in 1998 was at the height of its power, one of the most visited websites on the internet, a portal that tens of millions of people considered the front page of their online experience. Page and Brin offered to license Google search technology to Yahoo for $1 million. $1 million, the most expensive piece of paper ever, dismissed the gesture of rejection that will define Yahoo's legacy. Their reason: Yahoo did not want users to leave Yahoo to go find answers. They wanted users to stay on the portal. Search, the actual act of finding relevant information efficiently, was not, in Yahoo's view, what their product was really about. Page and Brin were not deterred. They went to Excite. George Bell, Excite's CEO, actually sat down and negotiated with them. The price came down from $1 million to $750,000. And then Bell walked away. His stated reason is one of the most ironic sentences in the history of technology. Bell said that Google's search was too good. If Excite used Google's algorithm, users would find what they were looking for and leave Excite immediately. But the best search engine in the history of the internet was rejected by the companies it approached because it worked too well. Page and Brin ran out of people to call. They had a technology nobody wanted to buy and a growing realization they were going to have to build it themselves. August 1998, 6 o'clock in the morning. A front porch in Palo Alto, California. Andy Bechtolsheim was already there when Page and Brin arrived. Andy Bechtolsheim was the co-founder of Sun Microscopes, one of the foundational companies of the modern internet. He had built real things, he had built important things, and he knew the difference between a PhD project and a world-changing technology. The demo lasted 15 minutes. Bechtolsheim did not ask many questions. He was not the kind of man who needed to be walked through implications. In the first few minutes of watching Google search, he understood it would not stay small. He reached into his briefcase, he pulled out his checkbook, he wrote a check for $100,000, made it out to Google Inc., placed it on the table, and told him he had another meeting and had to leave. And then he was gone. Page and Brin sat on that porch holding a check for $100,000 written to a company that did not legally exist. Google Inc. had not been incorporated yet. There was no bank account. There was no business address. There was just two young men and a piece of paper. They rushed to incorporate. They filed the paperwork at speed. They opened a bank account. And then they cashed the check. They found office space, which is perhaps too grand a phrase for what they actually found. What they found was a garage in Menlo Park owned by a Stanford acquaintance named Susan Wojcicki. Ran it for $1,700 a month. They brought in a ping pong table, salvaged servers, and 2 desks. They hired Craig Silverstein as their first employee. Google Inc. was open for business. The landlord of that garage, Susan Wojcicki, would later become the CEO of YouTube. The investor who wrote the first check, Andy Bechtolsheim, would watch his $100,000 become worth more than the GDP of many nations. And the 2 PhD students, rejected by every company they approached because their technology was too good, were about to build the most powerful information empire the world had ever seen. September 1998, Google.com went live, and the internet did not know how to react, because the internet in September 1998 looked nothing like Google.com. Every major website, every portal, every search engine had come to the same design conclusion: give users everything. Yahoo's homepage in 1998 had 183 separate links. 183. Alta Vista had search surrounded by advertisements, news feeds, banner promotions, and enough visual noise to give a graphic designer a headache. Excite had horoscopes, actual horoscope, Mercury and retrograde between your search box and your search results. The theory was sound from a business perspective. The more things on a page, the longer users stay. The longer users stay, the more advertising they see. The more advertising they see, the more revenue you generate. Google disagreed. Google.com loaded as a white page, completely, almost confrontationally white, a colorful logo in the center, a single search box, 2 buttons, Google search, and I'm feeling lucky. That was it. No news, no horoscopes, no shopping links, no banner advertisements, no weather, no sports scores, nothing, just the search box. Users who had never seen anything like it loaded the page and thought the rest of it had not loaded yet. And in that moment, in the pause between expecting clutter and realizing there wasn't any, something shifted. The emptiness was not a design failure. It was a declaration. It said, we are not trying to keep you here. We do not need your browsing history or your impulse clicks. We have one purpose. Tell us what you are looking for, and we will find it. That emptiness was the most powerful marketing statement in the history of the internet. Trust is communicated not just by what you promise, but by what you are willing to leave out. Google left out everything that wasn't the search, and by leaving it out, it told every user one thing: we exist to serve you. Users had not been told that before. Not like this, not this cleanly. They responded by never leaving. For 2 years after its launch, Google was free, not a sustainable kind of free, just free, running on investor money, growing fast and producing essentially nothing in terms of revenue. The dot-com bubble was beginning to strain. The money that had flowed freely was starting to ask harder questions about return. Daily searches are over 180 million, but revenue is still zero. How does this become a business? Page and Brin had a philosophical problem. They had, during their time at Stanford, co-authored an academic paper sharply critical of advertising-funded search engines, arguing that a search engine paid by advertisers would inevitably be biased toward advertiser interest. They believed this. They had written it down. They had published it. And yet they had a company with no revenue model. The solution, when it came from a man named Eric Veach and a concept called AdWords. Thanks, I have the AdWords plan. The breakthrough insight was elegant. A search engine already knows exactly what a user wants at the moment they type their query. Someone typing running shoes is not browsing aimlessly. They are expressing intent. They are saying, with the precision of someone who has made up their mind, I am looking for running shoes. I want them. That expressed intent is extraordinarily valuable to a running shoe company, more valuable than any billboard or television advertisement. What if Google could show that running shoe company's advertisement to exactly that person at exactly that moment? And what if the advertiser only paid when the user actually clicked, not when it was displayed, only when a real person, demonstrably interested, engaged? This was called pay-per-click, and it changed advertising permanently. Every model before pay-per-click was a gamble. You bought space and hoped the right person read it. You paid regardless of outcome. AdWords paid for results, only results. And there was a third element. Advertisers could not simply buy the top position. Ad placement was determined by how much they bid and how relevant their ad was to the user's search. An irrelevant ad ranked lower, even if it paid more. For the first time in the history of advertising, a company's financial incentives and its users' best interest pointed in exactly the same direction. Advertisers loved it. Users tolerated it. Google made money with it, the precision it had never experienced before. Its first year of operation, AdWords generated $440 million in revenue. Today, Google's advertising revenue exceeds $200 billion per year. The company that had no business model had accidentally invented the most profitable advertising system in human history. April 1st, 2004, April Fool's Day, Google announced a new product called Gmail. The announcement was so outlandish that for the first several hours, most people who heard about it assumed it was a joke, because the announcement said Google was offering a free email service with 1 gigabyte of storage. 1 gigabyte at a time when Yahoo Mail offered 4 megabytes, at a time when Hotmail offered 2 megabytes. Google was offering 250 times more storage than the competition. For free. It was not a joke. Within hours, the response was a mixture of disbelief, hunger, and alarm. Hunger because anyone who had hit a storage limit understood immediately what unlimited storage meant. Alarm because privacy advocates had read the fine print. To make Gmail work, Google would scan the content of every email and use it to display relevant advertisements. Google would read your emails, not a human being, an algorithm. But the principle stood: your private correspondence, your business communications, your personal messages, all of it would pass through Google's systems, and Google would use what it found to sell you things. Senators introduced legislation. Privacy advocates wrote papers. Commentators predicted Gmail would fail because users would refuse this invasion of their most private communication. Users did not care. They signed up in millions. The Gmail beta was initially invitation only, and invitations were so coveted that people sold them on eBay for hundreds of dollars for an invitation to a free email service. Because the storage was transformative, because the interface was clean and fast, because Google search applied to your own inbox, the ability to find any email ever sent or received in under a second without deleting anything was a revelation. The privacy concern was real as implication was not drawn. Critics who raised being paranoid a resentually 24 ainda as 1.8 billion eyes have used us as your product to digital communications. But understand what Gmail really was beneath the surface of the product. Gmail was not Google's entry into the email market. Gmail was Google's entry into the personal data market. Every email tells Google something: what you are buying and from whom, what services you subscribe to, what appointments you have, what trips you are planning, what health concerns are occupying your mind, what relationships you are managing, and how. Gmail turned Google from a company that knew what people searched for into a company that knew what people lived. And the data from Gmail fed back into Google's advertising system, making ads more precise, targeting more accurate, revenue higher. The flywheel was spinning. October 2006, Google announced that it was acquiring YouTube for $1.65 billion in Google stock. The reaction from the financial and technology press was almost uniformly negative. $1.65 billion for a website launched 18 months earlier, for a company with 65 employees, for a platform that had never generated a single dollar of profit, for a service with an unresolved copyright lawsuit. Every analyst called it reckless. Let me tell you what it actually was. In the 12 months leading up to the acquisition, YouTube had grown from a minor curiosity into the dominant video platform on the internet. Users were uploading 50,000 videos per day. The growth curve was vertical in the way that only the best internet products ever achieved, not driven by marketing, not by corporate strategy, but by the simple, overwhelming fact that video is the most compelling medium human beings have ever invented for sharing experience. Google had tried to build its own video platform, Google Video. It had failed, not dramatically, but clearly, measurably, in the way products fail when they are technically competent but lack the cultural momentum that turns a utility into a community. YouTube had the culture, YouTube had the community, YouTube had the momentum that no amount of engineering could manufacture or replicate. Google recognized this, and rather than spending another 3 years trying to catch up, Google wrote a check. $0.65 billion. Today, YouTube generates an estimated $35 billion in annual advertising revenue. The $1.65 billion Google paid in 2006 represents less than 5% of a single year's current revenue. But the strategic value of YouTube goes beyond any revenue calculation. YouTube is the world's second largest search engine, not second largest video platform, but search engine. Because when people want to know how to cook a recipe, they search YouTube. By acquiring YouTube, Google did not just enter the video market. Google monopolized search across two entirely different media formats. Text search Google, video search UT, which is Google. No competitor has ever challenged this duopoly. The $165 billion that seemed reckless in 2006 locked up the future of search before the future of search had even arrived. Every analyst who called it reckless was measuring the present. Google was buying the future. 2 years before the YouTube acquisition in 2005, Google made quite a purchase. The company was called Android Inc. It had fewer than 10 engineers. It had a product that had not launched. It had an idea, a mobile operating system for smartphones. Google paid $15 million. In 2008, 3 years after the acquisition, Google launched Android as a free open-source mobile operating system available to any phone manufacturer in the world. Free. Let that sit for a moment. In a market where Microsoft charged licensing fees to run Windows Mobile, in a market where Apple had made iOS entirely exclusive to its own hardware, Google said, here's a complete mobile operating system. Take it, use it, we will not charge you. Just take it. The manufacturers took it, Nokia took it, Samsung took it, HTC took it, LG took it, Motorola took it. Hundreds of manufacturers across dozens of countries built phones on top of it. By 2010, Android was the fastest growing mobile OS in the world. By 2012, there were 1 billion Android activations. Today, there are over 3 million reines maker Android system and Windows as the engine. And here's the thing that makes this the most quietly brilliant business decision in the history of the technology industry. Every Android phone, regardless of manufacturer, regardless of country, regardless of price, ships with Google search as the default search engine. Google did not give away Android out of generosity. Google gave away Android because every Android phone is a Google search terminal. Every Android user generates search queries. Every search query generates advertising revenue flowing back to Google. The free operating system is not a product. It is a distribution channel, a $50 million acquisition that built a free product that generates billions of dollars of advertising revenue every year. The most profitable pricing decision Google ever made was to charge nothing. We are halfway through Google's story, and the most important chapter is still ahead. Because what you have seen so far, the garage, PageRank, the blank homepage, AdWords, Gmail, YouTube, Android, all of that is the construction phase. The phase where Google built its walls and filled its moat and established the kind of dominance that most companies spend entire lifetimes attempting and almost none achieve. What comes next is the threat, the first real existential threat to Google's monopoly in 25 years. And the irony at the heart of that threat, the cruel, almost Shakespearean irony, is that Google invented it. Before we get there, if this documentary is showing you things about Google you've never known, hit that like button right now. Subscribe and ring the bell if you haven't already. We publish a new Empire documentary every single week, the stories of the companies that built the world you live in, and you do not want to miss what is coming. Now, back to Google, back to the threat that Google built, back to the AI war that will decide who controls the next 25 years of the internet. November 30th, 2022, a startup based in San Francisco released a chatbot. The startup was called OpenAI. The chatbot was called ChatGPT. Within 5 days, ChatGPT had 1 million users. Within 2 months, it had 100 million users. The fastest growing consumer application in the history of the internet. Faster than Instagram, faster than TikTok, faster than anything that had ever launched before it. And inside Google, a code red was called. The phrase was not a metaphor, it was the actual term used inside Google to describe the internal emergency that ChatGPT triggered. A reorientation of priorities, a marshalling of resources, a sudden and urgent recognition that something had changed in the world in a way that could not be ignored, managed, or waited out. Because ChatGPT did something the Google search engine could not. ChatGPT answered. Not pointed, not directed, not displayed a list of 10 blue links and left the user to navigate. ChatGPT read the question, understood it, and delivered the answer in a single clear paragraph in natural language immediately. Why click 10 links when an AI can just tell you? That question, simple, obvious, devastating, was the question that kept Google's leadership awake at night in the winter of 2022. Because if users stopped clicking links, the entire foundation of Google's business model, search plus advertising, began to crack. And here is the irony that haunts Google to this day. The technology that makes ChatGPT work, the fundamental architecture underlying every large language model, every conversational AI in 2024, was invented by Google researchers. 2017, a team of Google engineers published Attention is All You Need, introducing the transformer architecture that made it possible for AI systems to process language with unprecedented fluency, to understand context, to generate responses that felt genuinely natural. Every major AI system in operation today, GPT-4, Gemini, Claude, Llama, every model from every competing company is built on the transformer architecture that Google invented and published freely for the world. Google had the technology, Google had Lambda, Google had Palm, Google had Bard. By any technical measure, Google's AI capabilities were comparable to OpenAI, by some measures superior. But Google did not release them. And the reason Google did not release them is the same reason Excite refused to buy PageRank in 1998, because the technology was too good. A conversational AI that answers questions directly removes the need for users to click through to websites. If users don't click through to websites, the advertising ecosystem that generates $200 billion a year for Google begins to erode. Every AI query that replaces a search query is a piece of advertising revenue that did not happen. OpenAI had no such fear. OpenAI had no $200 billion business to protect. OpenAI could release ChatGPT without worrying about cannibalizing its own revenue, because it had no revenue to cannibalize. And that asymmetry changed everything. Google's greatest competitive advantage, its 25-year search monopoly, had become its greatest strategic paralysis. The company that wrote the paper, trained the researchers, and built the foundational AI infrastructure found itself in a race against the company it had accidentally trained. Google responded. It launched Bard, which became Gemini. It integrated AI into its search results through AI overviews. It restructured its entire product strategy around the AI transition. It is spending more on AI infrastructure than almost any entity on Earth. Whether it is moving fast enough is the question that will define the next chapter of this story. But here is what is certain. The AI war is the first genuine threat to Google's core business in 25 years. It is being fought not with patents or lawsuits or regulatory maneuvering, but with the same thing Google used to beat Yahoo and AltaVista and Excite in 1998. A better answer. Whoever delivers the best answer will own the internet for the next 25 years. Google built its empire on that principle. Now it has to defend it from the technology it invented. And so what is the lesson? Not the surface lesson, but the real one. The one that runs like a spine through every chapter of the story. Here it is. Simplicity at scale is an unbeatable advantage. Look at every single moment in the story where Google won. The blank white homepage beat Yahoo's 183 links. One box, two buttons. Simplicity won. PageRank beat keyword stuffing. One elegant signal. Who trust you beat an entire industry of noise. AdWords beat traditional advertising. One aligned model. Pay only for results beat decades of spray and pray. Simplicity won. Android's free distribution beat premium OS licensing. One pricing decision, charge nothing, beat complex commercial negotiation. Gmail's 1 GB of storage beat every competitor's complicated tiered pricing. One number, unlimited, beat a dozen confusing plans. Now look at every moment in the story where Google struggled. Google Plus, Google Social Network tried to replicate Facebook's complexity and failed. Google Video tried to build a platform without YouTube's cultural simplicity. Both too complicated. Google struggled the both time. The first iteration of Bard rushed to market under competitive pressure, launched with a factual error in the promotional video. Too complicated, too fast, too much to prove. Google stumbled. The pattern is consistent across 25 years. Every time Google made something simpler, it won. Every time it made something complex, it struggled. And this is where the AI era meets the Google story. Because the AI era is not at its heart a technology challenge for Google. Google has the technology. Its engineers are among the best in the world. Its data advantage is unmatched. Its infrastructure is staggering. The AI era is a simplicity challenge. Can Google make AI feel as clean, as trustworthy, as frictionless as that blank white homepage felt in 1998? Can it take the extraordinary complexity of a large language model and surface it to a billion users as something that feels as simple as typing a question into a box? Can they take 25 years of earned trust and extend it into a world where the answer is no longer a list of links but a generated paragraph? That question determines whether Google owns the next 25 years the way it owned the last 25. It is the same question it has been answering again and again since two PhD students argued about data organization on a campus tour in the summer of 1995. And the answer has always been the same. Make it simpler, make it better, make it work. That is the Google story. That was the full untold story of Google, from Stanford parking lot argument to a $2 trillion empire that runs the internet. From the $1 million offer that Yahoo turned down to the 100th launch of the technology invented and then feared to release. From the blank white homepage to the AI war that will decide who owns the next generation of the web. From two PhD students who just wanted to finish their dissertations to the most powerful information company in the history of human civilization. If this documentary told you something new, if it changed the way you think about the technology you use every single day, hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second and it means everything to this channel. Wow, I had no idea about Google's early history. Me neither. The documentary was really eye-opening. We should subscribe and ring the notification bell. Definitely. And share it with someone. Great idea. And drop your comments below. Question 1. What surprised you most about Google's story? Was the Rejection the CEO who turned down Google because it worked too well? Was it the AdWords accident, two idealists who hated advertising inventing the most profitable ad system in history? Was it the Android free strategy, the most expensive operating system ever given away? Tell me which one stopped you cold. Question 2. What is the one lesson from Google's story that applies to your life or your work right now? Drop it below. I read every comment. Question 3. What company do you want us to cover next? What is the empire whose story you need to understand? Drop the name below. The most requested company becomes our next documentary. One search box, one blank white page, one idea that refused to stay small. $2 trillion later, and the story is not finished yet. See you in the next one. The story of Google is also the story of a lesson that applies to every person who has ever built something, tried to sell something, or dreamed about building an empire of their own. The lesson is not that you have to start with nothing. Larry Page came from a comfortable family. Sergey Brin was the son of a mathematics professor. The lesson is that the right question, asked with precision, is worth more than any amount of resources. PageRank was a question, how do we know which pages matter? AdWords was a question, what if we only charge for ad? Android was a question, what if OS was free? Gmail was a question, every billion-dollar Google product began as a question. The pattern is not an accident. The pattern is a discipline. The discipline of asking the simplest possible version of the problem before building the most complex possible solution, and then delivering the solution in a form that feels as simple as the question. That is the Google lesson. And that is why the AI era is not a technology question for Google. It is a simplicity question. Can they apply the same discipline to AI that they applied to search? Can they take the answer they invented in a Stanford dorm room in 1996 and carry it into a world they could not have imagined then? The world where AI speaks your language, knows your context, and delivers not a list but an answer? That question, not a technical question but a human one, is the question that determines the next chapter of the Google story. And the answer will be written not in a research paper, but in whether a billion users feel understood by what Google gives them. Google started because two people couldn't agree on how information should be organized. It succeeded because the answer they found together was simpler and more accurate than anything anyone else had built. And that is still the whole game. Simpler, more accurate, better. Those three words are the entire Google playbook, written in 1995 in a parking lot at Stanford. applied for 30 years to every product, every acquisition, every response to every threat. The blank white homepage, the weighted link algorithm, the pay-per-click model, the free operating system, the 165 billion video acquisition, the code read in December 2022, the same 3 words every time. The Google story does not belong to Google alone. It belongs to anyone who has ever looked at a complicated, broken system, whether it is a search engine or a business or a life, and decided that simpler, more accurate, and better was worth the effort to achieve. And the $2 trillion, that is not the point of the story. The $2 trillion is what happens when the lesson is applied consistently across every product, across every decade, across every threat that tries to make it more complicated than it needs to be. And that single person typing a search, that is not a small ending to a big story. That is the whole point. Because the $2 trillion was never the goal. The answer was always the goal. And so, to understand Google fully, you have to understand that the company was never really in the search business. Google was in the answer business. And there is a profound difference between those two things. Search is a tool, and answer is a relationship. And Google understood from the very beginning that the company which made users feel most reliably understood would earn something no competitor could purchase: trust. At trust, earned one search result at a time, one accurate answer at a time, one product that did exactly what it promised at a time, is the real asset on Google's balance sheet, not the servers, not the algorithm, the trust. And that is precisely why the AI era is so threatening. Because for the first time, a competitor is offering a different kind of answer that some users trust more. And when trust migrates, empires fall. Google knows this better than anyone. Because Google is the company that watched Yahoo trust its portal over its users, and then took everything Yahoo had. Google knows exactly how quickly trust can move when a better answer appears. So Google is not fighting the AI war naively. It is fighting it with the full historical weight of knowing what happens to the company that misses the shift. And that knowledge that institutional memory is itself a competitive advantage. But institutional memory only goes so far. The real question for Google in the AI era is not whether they remember Yahoo's mistake, it is whether they can avoid repeating it. Because incumbents rarely see the shift until it has already moved past them. The companies that Yahoo dismissed, the ones Yahoo thought were too small, too early, or too narrowly focused to be threats, became the companies that replaced them. History does not repeat itself, but it rhymes with extraordinary consistency. And so the Google story in 2024 is not finished. It is entering its most important chapter, the chapter where the incumbent must become the challenger again, where the empire must rediscover the hunger that built it. As the nature of the technology industry, and perhaps the nature of any industry that operates at real scale, success is never permanent, advantage is always temporary. The only durable edge is the relentless willingness to ask better questions. Google has been asking better questions for 30 years. The question now is whether the next question, the AI question, will be answered with the same discipline, the same simplicity, and the same absolute commitment to the user that answered every previous question. But here is what gives Google an advantage that the analysts measuring quarterly revenue cannot see. Google does not just have data. Google has the most comprehensive map of human curiosity ever assembled, and curiosity is the fuel of the AI era. Every query ever typed into Google is a data point about what humans need to understand. Multiply that by 8.5 billion searches per day across 25 years, and you have a training dataset for AI that no competitor can replicate from scratch. But AI can build a better model for today. But Google has 25 years of context for what humans actually want to know. And that context applied to AI training is an advantage that cannot be bought, copied, or downloaded. This is why the people who wrote off Google in December 2022, the analysts who declared the search era over, the commentators who said ChatGPT had already won, were making the same mistake Yahoo made in 1998. They were measuring the present, the moment of ChatGPT's explosive launch, the code read inside Google, the stumble with Bard. But Google has never been a company that is measured accurately in the present. Google is measured accurately in the future. The 1.65 billion YouTube acquisition was measured in the present and called reckless. The 50 million Android acquisition was measured in the present and called minor. The blank white homepage was measured in the present. Google has always looked wrong in the short term. And Google has always looked right in the long term. Not because Google is infallible. Google plus Google VO early Bard prove it is not. But because the foundation disciplines simplicity, accuracy, user trust. So what does Google need to do to win the AI era? Not the technical answer, the human answer. Google needs to make 1 billion people feel that the AI-powered Google gives them a better answer than the search-powered Google did. And better means simpler, not more impressive. Simpler, not more impressive. That is a lesson that every technology company learns the hard way, because engineers are rewarded for impressiveness and users reward simplicity. The gap between those two incentives is where most products fail. Google knows this. Every product that made Google great, the white homepage, AdWords, the 1 gigabyte of Gmail storage, the free Android, was a product that engineers found boring and users found transformative. Boring to build, transformative to use. That is the formula. And so, as Google applies its engineering excellence to the AI era, the real discipline required is restraint. The discipline of the blank white page applied to artificial intelligence. The discipline of building something that feels like it has always been there. That is the hardest thing in technology, to build something that feels inevitable. Something that makes users think, how did I ever do this without it? Not how impressive is the engineering, but how did I live before this existed? Wow, there it is. Google has produced that feeling more times than any company in the history of technology. Search in 1998, AdWords in 2000, Chibaza Ford 6, Android EV. The question for the AI era is whether they can produce it one more time. And if Google's AI integration becomes the moment that 1 billion users feel understood in a new way, then the AI war will be remembered the same way every previous challenge to Google has been remembered, as the moment Google got better. But if they cannot, if the complexity of the AI transition proves too entangled with the advertising model to be solved cleanly, then the AI war will be remembered as the moment the most powerful information company in history met its match. Either way, the story of Google is one of the most important stories ever told about how a technology becomes civilization. Not just infrastructure, not just a product. Civilization, the shared system that everyone depends on without fully understanding. When the electricity grid went down in 2003 in the northeastern United States, 50 million people were reminded that electricity was not a product, it was civilization. When Google goes down even briefly, the world notices that is not a company, that is infrastructure. Larry Page and Sergey Brin set out to organize the world's information. And the quiet, extraordinary fact of the story is that they actually did it. Not perfectly, not without controversy, not without the accumulation of power that makes regulators uncomfortable, but they did. They organized the world's information. And in doing so, they changed what it means to know something, what it means to learn something, and what it means to be a curious human being in the 21st century. Before Google, access to information was distributed unequally. Those with access to great libraries, great universities, great teachers had more of the world explained to them. After Google, anyone with internet access could find any answer to any question in under a second. That is the true achievement of Google, not the market cap, not the advertising revenue, not the product portfolio. The true achievement is the democratization of access to human knowledge at a scale that no institution, no government, and no library ever approached. And yet, and this is the complexity at the heart of the Google story, that same democratization of access comes with a concentration of power that deserves scrutiny. One company should not be the only library on Earth. That much power in one place is never without risk. The regulatory scrutiny Google faces in the United States and the European Union and markets around the world is not an overreaction. It is the natural consequence of building something so essential that the world cannot function without it. Essential things require oversight. Google will argue and has argued that its dominance is the result of being the best, not of being abusive. And there is significant truth in that argument. Google did not force users to use it. Users chose it because it worked better than everything else. But regulators will argue and have argued that paying to be the default on every device, on every browser or operating system creates a barrier that no quality advantage can overcome. That the game is rigged when the starting position costs $20 billion a year to maintain. Both arguments are true, both matter, and the tension between them, between earned excellence and structural advantage, is one that societies have been navigating since the first monopoly was broken up and the first trust was busted. Google is not a new problem, and that is another reason why the Google story matters beyond business. It is a story about power, who has it, how they got it, whether they deserve to keep it, and what happens to all of us when information itself becomes the most valuable resource on Earth. The oil barons of the 19th century control the resource that powered the industrial economy. The data holders of the 21st century control the resource that powers the information economy. The parallels are uncomfortable, and they are real, and they deserve to be spoken plainly. None of this diminishes what Larry Page and Sergey Brin built. None of it makes Google a villain or a hero. It makes Google what it is, a company of extraordinary ambition, ordinary achievement, and extraordinary consequence. And extraordinary consequence requires extraordinary attention. That is the full untold story of Google. Not the sanitized version, not the hagiography or the hit piece. The real story with its extraordinary origins, its brilliant decisions, costly mistakes, its structural power, and its unresolved future. And now, before we go to the final questions and the final calls to action, let us return one last time to the lesson. Because the lesson is not just about Google. It never was. The lesson's about you. Every person watching this documentary uses Google. Many of you use it dozens of times per day without thinking about it. But after 40 minutes of this story, I want you to never use Google the same way again. Because now you know what it actually is. When you type a query into Google, you are not just using a search engine. You are adding a data point to the most comprehensive map of human curiosity ever assembled. You are participating in the training of the most powerful AI system in history. You are voting. Your search tells Google what you care about. Your click tells Google what you trust. Your time on a result tells Google what you find valuable. And in aggregate, 8.5 billion of those signals per day shape the information reality for every person on Earth. That is an extraordinary amount of power to place in one box on one white page. And knowing that, understanding the mechanism, the stakes, and the story behind it makes you a more informed participant in the information economy that Google built. More informed participants ask better questions, and better questions produce better answers, which is perhaps the most fitting note on which to end the story of a company that was born from two people asking a question nobody else had thought to ask. Two PhD students, one garage, one question. And the answer to that question, asked with enough precision, enough discipline, enough commitment to simplicity, became the architecture of the 21st century information world. And from that garage, the lesson that applies to every person who has ever had an idea and wondered whether it was worth the effort to pursue it. The lesson is this: the idea that is worth the most is not the most complex idea, it is the most precisely stated one. PageRank was a precisely stated question. What if importance is determined by who trusts you, not what you say about yourself? For precision built the empire. Precision is the discipline. So if you take one thing from 40 minutes of the story, take this. Before you build something, before you sell something, before you pitch something, find the single most precise version of the problem you are trying to solve. Because precision is what separates a good idea from a great one. And then, once you have the precise question, answer it in the simplest possible way. Not the most impressive way, not the way that shows the most of what you know. The simplest way that actually solves the problem. The Google way. That is the Google way. And whether Google wins the AI war or loses it, whether the next chapter of the story is triumph or disruption, the Google way will remain the most important business lesson of the last 30 years. Simpler, more accurate, better. From the Stanford parking lot 1985 to the AI war of 2024, 30 years of one discipline applied relentlessly across every product, every acquisition, and every competitive threat. Simpler, more accurate, better, every single time. One search box, one blank white page, one idea that refused to stay small, and $2 trillion later the story is not finished. The next chapter is being written right now in a research lab, in a boardroom, in a code review, and wherever that next chapter takes Google, whether it vindicates the empire or humbles it, the people who understood this story will be better positioned to understand what comes next, because the pattern does not change, only the technology changes. That is the final insight of the Google story. The technology changes, from PageRank to neural networks, from search boxes to conversational AI, from blue links to generated paragraphs. But the question never changes: who gives the best answer? Whoever gives the best answer wins. In 1998, Google gave better answers than Yahoo. In 2004, Gmail gave better answers to email storage than Hotmail. In 2000 is the strategy. And in 2024, the AI are asked the same question one more time: who gives the best answer? ChatGPT gave a compelling new answer. Gemini will have to give a better one. And the winner of that contest will own the next generation of the information world. And so we arrive at the end of 40 minutes in the beginning of a question. What do you do with a story like this? You carry it. You apply it. Use it the next time someone tells you that the incumbent is too big to be challenged or the challenger is too small to matter. Yahoo said Google was too small to matter. Excite said Google worked too well to be useful. They were both catastrophically wrong, because they were measuring the present while Google was building the future, and that distinction, present versus future, is the whole game. Are we measuring the present or building the future? The next time you are in a meeting, a pitch, negotiation, or a decision, ask yourself a measurement of present. Is it because my story is to build the future? And that brings us to the questions I promised you at the beginning. 3 questions for the comment section, and I read every comment personally, because your answers make the next documentary better, and the next one better still. Question 1. What surprised you most about Google's story? Was it the Excite rejection, the CEO who turned down Google because it worked too well? Was it the AdWords accident, 2 idealists who hated advertising inventing the most profitable ad system in history? Was it the Android free strategy, the most expensive operating system ever given away? Tell me below. Tell me which moment in this story stopped you cold, made you put down your phone, and forced you to reconsider something you thought you understood. Question 2. What is the one lesson from Google's story that applies to your life or your work right now? The simplicity lesson, the distribution lesson, the data lesson, the lesson about building the future while everyone else is measuring the present? Drop it below. And question 3. What company do you want us to cover next? What is the empire whose story you need to understand? Drop the name below. The most requested company becomes our next documentary. The community chooses. I build it. If this documentary gave you something, one new idea, one new way of seeing the technology used every single day, one story you will tell someone else because it deserves to be passed on, hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second. Subscribe and ring the notification bell. We publish a new empire documentary every single week. The hidden stories of the companies that built the world, and every single week the story is designed to give you something you did not have before you sat down to watch. You have to see this. It's the real story of Google. Oh wow, really? Let me see. Share this video of one person who uses Google every day, sing about where it came from, how it works, and bust if can. And drop your comments below, because the conversation that happens under this video is always the best part. The comments are where the story continues, where the lessons get applied, where the community adds what the documentary left out. One search box, one blank white page, one idea that refused to stay small. That is how Google begins. But how every great thing begins is with one person or two who looked at a broken system and decided the broken part was the opportunity. The broken part is always the opportunity. The chaos is always where the map gets drawn. The noise is always where the signal gets found. And the two people who find the signal first and deliver it more simply than anyone else, they build the empire. Larry Page and Sergey Brin found the signal in the Stanford parking lot in 1995. They argued about everything. They agreed on one thing. Turned into one algorithm, built into one company, became the most important information infrastructure in the history of civilization. $2 trillion later, 3 billion Android devices, 1.8 billion Gmail users, 92% of global search, $35 billion a year from YouTube alone, and a code read in December 2022 that reminded everyone, including Google, that the story is never over. The story is never over. That is the final truth of every empire documentary we have ever made. The biggest companies in the world, the ones that look most permanent, most dominant, most impossible to challenge, are always one better answer away from their next great test. And that next better answer, wherever it comes from, whatever form it takes, will be built on the lesson that Google taught the world. Simplicity wins, accuracy wins, trust wins, and whoever earns those three things first in the format people actually want wins everything. This is Alphabet. This is Google. This is the untold story of the company that ran the last 25 years of the internet and is fighting right now to run the next 25. See you in the next one. One search box, one blank white page, one idea that refused to stay small. $2 trillion later, and the story is not finished yet. The cursor is still blinking, the next search is still coming, and the best answer still wins.